Good morning, everyone. We are on Daf Mem Tes Amud Aleph in the article 49A1, line 8, Daf Yomi for the week. It's sponsored by Reb Aaron and Evelyn Kislasi in honor of the birth of a grandson to Yaakov and Yael Weiss. Mazel tov. That's beautiful, amazing news. And continued nachas to Reb Aaron, and she continue to join us. We are getting started. We are in the middle of a machlokas, an argument between Rabbi Yossi and the Chachamim, which has us a little puzzled because this conversation of what's called zev gorim, that when you have two causes of something, you have something that's permitted and something that's prohibited. Which is the predominant characteristic, the prohibited characteristic or the permitted characteristic? And so we, on the one hand, saw Rabbi Yossi. We all saw in two different brises Rabbi Yossi hold opposing viewpoints. In our Mishnah, we had Rabbi Yossi stating that he didn't like the idea of us using vegetables that were planted under an Asherah tree when the leaves fall down and they fertilize the soil, because the soil is permissible, but the leaves are not, and so it's a zevazek gorim is prohibited. And yet, we had another circumstance where Biosi said that one grinds up a metal idol and then uses that to fertilize the fields, that is permissible. So we are struggling a little bit to understand what Rabbi Yossi holds as far as zeh gorim. So the Gemara says that we're going to adjust, and we're going to presume that you can't explain both of these brises as being Rabbi Yossi's opinion, but rather ha Rabbi Elazar v'ha Rabbanan. One refers to Rabbi Elazar's opinion, one's the Rabbanan's opinion. So therefore, Rabbi Yossi is Zevazek Goreim is prohibited. The permitted, the one that talks about Zevazek Goreim, that's going to be Rabbi Elazar. This is going to be the argument between Rabbi Elazar and the Rabbanan. So, hi Rabbi Elazar, hi Rabbanan. Which Rabbi Elazar are we talking about, and which Rabbanan are we talking about in this argument of Zevazek Goreim? Sorry, Brian, if your volume is not working, it is not on our end. Our volume seems to be working properly. So, somebody type that to Brian while I continue. So, Ilema, Rabbi Elazar v'Rabbanan dis'or. If you're going to tell me, maybe it is the argument between Rabbi Elazar and the Rabbanan when it comes to se'or. Se'or is like sourdough, right? They have the starter. I didn't know anything about all this stuff, but now everybody's all into sourdough. So the sourdough starter, we use yeast a lot of times in our bread, but I guess they would have this leavening dough, which they would add to their bread, and that would cause it to rise, much like our sourdough. Ditznan, our Mishnah says, Se'or shel v'shel truma. If you've got this leavening agent, and this leavening agent was started with flour that was regular, the regular what do you call it? Chulin, which is non-consecrated flour. And then you also have se'or, which is truma. Now, the truma stuff, unless you're a Kohen, you can't use that. So now this person gets his bread started to rise by a mixture, a dough of this. The se'or has a mixture of both the chulin and the truma. Shenaflu l'toch ha'isa, that falls into his dough. Lo bezek kedei lechmetz v'lo bezek kedei lechmetz. So, it done on with either amount of this leavening agent, he does not have sufficient amount to leaven his bread to cause it to rise. Each one, but in a combination, he's got enough. V'nitztarfu v'chimtzu, by combining these two together, so we've got a classical case of zevazek gorim. We've got permitted leavening agent, and we got prohibited leavening agent. So Rabbi Eliezer Omer Rabbi Yozer says, Achron Haniba. Whatever the last one that falls in, that's the one I go by. So if the second leavening agent that comes in and completes the volume that I need in order to cause the bread to rise is the permissible one, then the bread is permitted. If the second one that falls in is the prohibited one, then it's prohibited. The Chachamim disagree. Bein shnafel iser lechatchila, ubein shnafel iser lebasof. It does not matter which one fell in first. Eino aser achik bo kedei lachmetz. It doesn't become prohibited unless you have sufficient of the prohibited item that would prohibit the whole thing. So therefore, what it sounds like is the Chachamim are saying a zev v'zek gorim. If I have a combination of the two, it would be permissible, right? Because I need sufficient leavening agent to prohibit it. Whereas Rabbi Elazar seems to imply that there is a circumstance where it is prohibited if the last leavening agent that falls in is the prohibited one. So the Amar Abaye says, Lo shanu ela shekodim v'silek es ha'isur. Right now, this is only talking about, because we wonder, why does it matter then if it's a matter, if he holds Zevis and Gorim is prohibited, why does it matter which one fell in last? Once something falls in that's prohibited, it contributes, it should be prohibited. So Abaye clarifies, and he says, what happened in this circumstance is that the prohibited item fell in first, and then he took it out. Now it's not rising, and the prohibited item is gone. So then when the permitted item falls in, then that could be permitted, because really the permitted item is the only thing that's left in this dough that's causing it to rise. Aval lo kadam v'silek. But if he never took out the prohibited item, so then velosikas iser, also then it would be prohibited, no matter which one fell in first. So therefore, that is a classic example of Zeves Gorim. I've got two items in this dough that combined together cause the bread to rise. That one is permitted, one is prohibited. It becomes prohibited. The time of the so we might the time it. So therefore, we're going to presume it's a Zeves Gorim argument. The Chachamim, the Rabbanim are saying if I've got two different causes, it's permitted. And Rabbi Elazar is going to say both are causes, then it's prohibited.
I still think, yeah.
Yeah, Brian, we can hear you. Hopefully you can hear us. Okay. Umimai de Taimed Rabbi Eliezer kita Abaye. How do we know that Rabbi Eliezer, Abaye gave a good answer, but how do we know that's the explanation of what Rabbi Eliezer is saying? Dilma Taimed Rabbi Eliezer mishum da'achar acharon ani ba. Maybe Rabbi Eliezer is dealing with a different issue, and he holds that it's not a matter of Zev Gorim, the two combined, but he holds that the item that causes the bread to rise is not a combination. He says whichever is the last one that fell in, that caused the bread to rise. Therefore, I don't care about looking at the two things. You're right. The Chachamim say Zev Gorim, two items together is permitted. Maybe Rabbi Eliezer would agree with that. Two items together are permitted. This is not that case. This is a case where the prohibited item falls in last. That actually causes the bread to rise. So that's what makes it prohibited. If the permitted fell in last, that would make it permitted. So he only looks at whatever falls in last. Maybe that's a different issue. Gemir be'isura asura. If the last thing to fall in that creates the dough to rise is the prohibited item, then the dough that rises is prohibited. Ve'i gemir behetera. And if it finally, the last thing that falls in is the permissible one, and that causes the bread to rise, then it's permitted. It's not a zev gorim because they're not combining together really. It's whatever's the last one. So then it would be mutar, bain saliko, bain lo salik. And it doesn't matter whether you took it out or you didn't take it out. The Abaye one is because you took it out, therefore they don't combine together. Maybe it's irrelevant whether you took it out. Maybe being combined together is permitted. It's just a matter of whatever the last one was. That's what Rabbi Eliezer looks at. El Rabbi Elazar v'Rabbanan. So therefore that doesn't prove anything. So let's not worry about this dough case. Right? So let's put the dough case aside. Let's try again. El Rabbi Elazar v'Rabbanan de'etzim. Let's say it's Rabbi Elazar and the Chachamim when it comes to wood. Ditnan, we learned in a Mishnah. Nato hamena etza asura behana'a. Okay, so now somebody is using a wood that comes from a Asherah tree in order to heat up his oven. Okay, so what happens is he takes this prohibited wood that's prohibited from getting benefit. Hasik bas tanur chadash. And he heats up the oven that's a brand new oven. Now, the way that clay ovens work is the first time you fire it up, that solidifies the oven and makes it good for use, right? Otherwise, you can't, with too much moisture and it'll crack. So therefore, you have to be able to heat the oven up the first time in order to be able to solidify that pottery and make it hard. So if you used the prohibited wood, essentially, you got benefit out of the wood that created the oven. Would it make your food not kosher? It would make it prohibited because you would be prohibited from getting any benefit from the oven, right? That's Yehuda's question, right? The answer is since the wood is prohibited and you got benefit from the wood by making an oven, the oven is now prohibited to get any benefit from, and therefore you can't bake any bread in. And if you do, you can't eat that bread, right? So that's what winds up happening. So what do? You got to smash the oven. The oven can't do anything. You can't do anything with it. Yoshan, if it's an old oven, the oven is already in good working order and condition. So yutzon. So then what you got to do is let the oven cool off. You can't get any benefit from the wood. So you heated up the oven. So let it cool off and start again. That way you haven't gotten any benefit from the wood that you heated up. Afa boes apas. Now, this was Yehuda's question. What happens to the bread? If you bake the bread in this oven with this wood, asura, then the bread becomes prohibited because you got benefit. The bread becomes the benefit of the wood. Can't eat that. Can't get benefit. So asura behana. Nisarva ba'achirim. Now, let's say you got this bread and you've got some permitted loaves and you mix the bunch up, right? You mix your permitted ones and your prohibited ones up. Kulan asuros behana. Then all of them become prohibited. Now, Brian is listening in and he's saying, well, why not batal berov? I know Brian's questions already. Brian is thinking, why not? Even if we can't hear him, we can't hear. But we know that he's saying, why isn't that you go by the majority? You've got a majority. So the answer to that is that we have a rule that if you have some object of significant size, usually a loaf of bread is a significant item, it does not become nullified, right? So therefore, despite the fact that you may have more permitted loaves than prohibited loaves, if you've got a significant loaf, it can't become nullified in the majority. So it's not a kavua issue. It's just that it's a davar hamyuchad, right? It's an item that has significance on its own. So therefore, it doesn't become permitted. Now that's a side point. Rabbi Elazar, but I knew Brian was going to worry about it. So Rabbi Elazar says, Yolich hana liyam hamelach. Rabbi Elazar says, the bread is not prohibited. You can still use the bread. You know what? Though you can't get benefit out of it. So here's the solution. Take some money, whatever the value of this prohibited loaf is, and throw that away. Okay? So now, because if I do that, I'm not getting any benefit from the bread. Because what am I getting? The bread is, let's say I've got $5 worth of bread here. So now I've got, $5 worth of hana. If I take $5 out of my wallet and I tear it up and I throw it into the Yam Melach, so then I eat the bread, I've gained zero benefit from the bread. That's how Rabbi Elazar looks at it. So Amrulo, so the Chacham said to him, Ein pidyon lavodas kochavim. What it sounds like you're doing is you're redeeming idolatry, right? If I had an item and I donated to the Beis HaMikdash, I had bread and I donated it to the Beis HaMikdash. Now I want to eat that bread. I can take $5 and give that to the Beis HaMikdash and buy my bread back from the Beis HaMikdash. That's no problem. I may have to add a little bit on in order to be able to verify that I'm paying the right market value and price, but I can redeem my items from the Beis HaMikdash. I cannot do that when it comes to Avodah Zara. Avodah Zara doesn't have a redemption policy. It's a prohibited item. So I can't use it. I can't get any benefit. I can't buy it back. So they are worried about what Rabbi Elazar suggests as a solution. Now, as I said, Rabbi Elazar doesn't view this as a redemption. Rabbi Elazar views this as a removal of my benefit, right? If I'm gaining no benefit, then the bread itself is not prohibited, right? I can use something that comes from Avodah Zara if I gain no benefit from it, right? So therefore, like I can heat up an oven with this wood and then cool it off and basically ruin and burn all the wood. I'd get no benefit out of it. That would be no problem, right? There's no prohibition there in using something and gaining no benefit. So therefore, if I've offset my benefit by destroying a corresponding amount of money in my possession, I'm gaining no benefit. Okay, so now, Rabbanan depligi alei Rabbi Elazar man. So therefore, man ninhu. So these Rabbanan are arguing with Rabbi Elazar. Rabbanan say, you can't get any benefit from this loaf of bread. It's prohibited b'hana. And Rabbi Elazar suggests, sure, I can redeem it. No problem. It's not an isra of, it's zev zegorim. Maybe who are these rabbis who argue with this Rabbi Elazar point of view? Ilim Rabbanan de'etzim. So if it's the Rabbanim who are the, one second. So who are the rabbis who hold that Zev Zegorim is permitted? In this we've got this Rabbi Elazar basically is suggesting that Zev Zegorim is prohibited. I cannot use this oven. I guess the oven is combining together with the wood in order to bake this bread. I cannot use it because the wood is part of the prohibited item, and therefore the bread is prohibited, according to Rabbi Eliezer. So who are the Chachamim who disagree with Rabbi Eliezer? So what about the Ilema Rabbanan de Eitzim? What about the rabbis of this brisa here that just told us that you can't use this bread? Well, Achmuri Machmiri, they can't be the ones who argue with him because they're stricter than Rabbi Elazar is. Rabbi Elazar says the bread is prohibited. It's got two combining factors. It's got the wood, it's got the oven, and it combines together, and the bread is prohibited. Comes the rabbis and they say, no, not only is it prohibited the way you think, it's even more prohibited. So they're not arguing with him. So we know Rabbi Elazar holds that Zev Gorim is prohibited, but we need a viewpoint of the Rabbanim who say it's permitted to know that they argue. Ella Rabbanim disseor. Rather, let's go back to that bread case. Remember, we had that bread where we combined and we put the two leavening agents in together, and the Chachamim in that case said that that dough is permitted. So therefore, you see that there is a group of rabbis who hold that adding two things together makes a permissible item. So I've got Rabbi Elazar on one side, I've got the Chachamim, although not in the same brisa, but I do have a viewpoint that holds Zev Gorim is permitted, and I have a viewpoint of Rabbi Elazar that says Zev Gorim is prohibited. Okay, so therefore, we now have a consistency. Eimer d'shmeis luhu l'rabbanan demekili b'seor ba'avodas kochavim mi mekili. So 1 second. All that we have there is we've got a lenient viewpoint of the rabbis that are talking about the case of bread. The only thing with the case of bread that was a case of truma. And it's possible that Avodah Zara is stricter than any other Avera. And so therefore, just because we have a example of where the rabbis are claiming that two items combining together creates a prohibited item, if that case is not a case of idolatry, we cannot extrapolate from there to say that they also hold that if I have a prohibited item from idolatry, that it would also be prohibited. So therefore, that does not prove Rabbi Elazar, that does not prove that there is a Chachamim who hold Zevik Zegorim is permissible. So therefore, forget this whole thing. This was a whole sidetrack. We had Rabbi Elazar, the Rabbanan. We tried to be able to say which one was which. Ella, Liolam, Ha, Rabbi Yossi, Veha, Rabbanan. So rather, we are going to be able to go back and explain the argument between the two different brises. We're going to go back between our Mishnah and our brisa is going to be is going to be Rabbi Yossi and the Chachamim. So how do we explain where Rabbi Yossi on the one hand in a brisa says that you're allowed to get benefit from a field that is fertilized by the powder from pulverized Avodah Zara, and then our Mishnah where Rabbi Yossi says you cannot get benefit when the vegetables grow with the mulched leaves? So the answer is Rabbi Yossi. So the answer is the statement that Rabbi Yossi makes, where it says that you can get benefit from the fertilized field. That's really Rabbi Yossi's position. Rabbi Yossi holds that it's permissible. Zev Gorim is permissible. Now we have to explain if he holds that Zev Gorim is permissible, why is it that he has a problem with the leaves that fall on the vegetables? The answer is that's not really his opinion. He's really saying the Divreihem D'Rabbanan Amri Lahu. He's saying, according to you guys, there's a problem here. How does this work? L'didi, if you ask me about planting vegetables under an Asherah tree, Zev Gorim mutter. You've got no problem. You've got permitted soil. You've got mulch that falls from the tree. I would have no problem with it. That's what Rabbi Yossi says. But he says, but according to you, Rabbanon, who hold Damrisu, Zev Osir, that you hold that two causes together create a prohibited item. So now, Oduli Mihas, Af Yerokos B'Mosa Geshamim, you have to agree with me that if you plant vegetables under a tree, the leaves that fall is mulch, and you've got a combined problem. So I have no problem, Rabbi Yossi says. I'm not going to give you an issue with the fact that it's permissible. It is permissible. But according to you guys, who you are the ones who say that if I've got two causes together, it's prohibited, why shouldn't this be prohibited also? So for Rabbanon, Kid Omar Rav Mari Breder of Kahana. And the Rabbanon are going to answer according to the way that Rav Mari, the son of Kahana, says, Amar Rav Yehuda, said in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, the Mari Breder of Kahana. That's the Rabbanon are going to say, like Rav Mari, the son of Kahana, who said, that's because we said earlier that you lose what you gain. Remember, we said that the shade is problematic for the vegetables, and the mulch is beneficial for the vegetables. So we had the example where Rav Mari, the son of Rav Kahana, said about skinning the animal in the Beis Hamikdash, where you may gain a profit from the skin, the hide, but you'll lose profit from the meat. And he says that you lose what you gain. So this also is what Rabbi Yossi is saying. That's what Chachamim may hold back to Rabbi Yossi here. You're right, Rabbi Yossi. You're gaining something from the mulch, but the reason why we don't consider that a gain is because it's canceled out by the shade of the rest of the Asherah tree. So planting under the Asherah tree is a net zero or a loss. Hence, why we don't consider it a zev ezeg gorim. Okay, and so to that, Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Rabbi Yehuda said, Shmuel halacha Rabbi Yossi. The halacha is in fact like Rabbi Yossi, and it is zev ezeg gorim is permitted. Okay, so therefore we hold like Rabbi Yossi. Okay, so next, let's talk about Hahu Ginsa di Izdavo Bezavla Davolos Kachavim. There was once a garden that was fertilized with fertilizer that came from Avodah Zara. And Shalach Rav Amram Hamed Rav Yosef. So Rav Amram came before Rav Yosef. Amar le Hachi Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Now this is what Rav Yehuda said in Shmuel. Halacha Rav Yossi. The halacha is like Rav Yossi. Therefore, the field is fine. Whatever group grows from that field is fine. You've got prohibited fertilizer. You've got permitted soil. Hence, it's permissible. Okay, next Mishnah. Mem Test Amud Beis. Notomi mena eitzim asurin behana. Let's say you've got an Asherah tree, and you pluck off from it sticks. Okay, so you're not allowed to get any benefit from that wood. That wood comes from an Asherah tree. It's prohibited. Hesik behenas tanur. If you heat up the oven, this is the case that we just brought. You heat up the oven. Im chadash. If it's a new oven, you touch. Now you've got to destroy the oven because the oven got benefit from the wood. Im yashin. If it's an old oven, so then yutzan. You've got to let the oven cool off because you cannot bake any bread with this wood. Alpha bos, if you did bake the bread, asura behana, you can't get any benefit. Nisarva ba'achiros, if it gets mixed up together with others, kulan asuros behana, then they are all prohibited from getting any benefit. Rabbi Elazar Amar Rabbi Elazar says, Yolich hanali yamamelach, you're allowed to take the money, that is the value of that bread, and throw it into the sea. And Amrulo, they said to him, Ein pidyon lavodos kam, you can't just redeem idol worship. Okay, we're going to discuss that in a moment, but we have a parallel case, almost identical. Natal hemena karkur. You take from this Asherah tree, not you, but somebody takes from an Asherah tree, a weaver's needle. It's like a stick that they would use to be able to keep the threads from getting tangled, right? They'd keep them separated. So it's basically an intact stick. Aser bahana, you cannot get any benefit from it. Aragbo es habeged, if you use this while weaving the garment, so then aser bahana, you can't get any benefit from that garment. Nisarev ba'achirim, if it gets mixed up with other garments, ba'achirim, and then those get mixed up with other ones, kulan asurin bahana, they all become prohibited from getting any benefit. Rabbi Elazar Amar, Rabbi Elazar says the solution is you don't have to throw away everything. Yolich hanali yamamelech. All you have to do is take the value of the garments that were prohibited by Avodah Zara, take that out of your pocket and throw that into the Yamamelech. Amrulo, they said to him, Ein podin lavodos kum, you cannot just redeem idolatry. Now, you basically have two identical cases, right? One is firing up an oven, one is weaving. Now, while that's nice and it's parallel, the Mishnah shouldn't bother to give us an unnecessary case. If I could have already known that I can't use the stick for heating up an oven, for sure I can't use the stick. I should also know I can't use the stick for weaving. Why is it any different? So the Gemara answers that. Utsricha, I need both cases. Because if you told me the first case about the heating up the stick, that's where we would need to hear that Rabbi Eliezer holds his opinion, despite the fact that it's prohibited, despite the fact that the wood is already destroyed. The wood is consumed. About karkur, but with the wood that is being used as the item that's separating the weaving, the prohibited item is still here. Maybe he would agree with the Rabbanan. You can't just throw the benefit away. Maybe we have to be stricter because the prohibited item never got used up. It's right here. Viyash and karkur, and if you had told me the case of the spindle or whatever, the weaver's spindle, so then baha kami rabbanan, that would be the case. Perhaps we would presume the rabbanan are being strict with that case because that item still exists. Aval pas, but when it comes to the bread, where you can't discern any of the wood, the value into the bread itself, So therefore, there's no real prohibited item mixed in with the bread. Module the Rabbanon, they would agree with the Rabbanon and just say, I mean, with Rabbi Eliezer, they would agree with Rabbi Eliezer and just throw the money into the sea. Come up. So therefore, tzricha. So therefore, we come to see that it does not matter whether the item is consumed, the item is not consumed. The halacha remains the same. Rabbi Eliezer says that you can redeem it, quote unquote. It's not really redemption, but you can use the money, get rid of the value, and the Chum say you cannot. Amar Reb Chia Brei de Rabba Bar Nachmeni. Reb Chia, the son of Rabba Bar Nachmeni, says Amar Rav Chisda, and Rav Chisda Amar Zeiri in the name of Zeiri. Halacha Rabbi Eliezer. The halacha is in fact like Rabbi Eliezer. Ikad de Amri. There are those who say Amar Rav Chisda Amar li Abba Bar Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda said that Abba said to me, Abba Bar Rav Chisda said to me, Haki Amar Zeiri, that this is what Zeiri said. Halacha Rabbi Eliezer, that the halacha is like Rabbi Eliezer. So either way, whoever it was that said it, the halacha is like Rabbi Eliezer, and that you can, in fact, take care of your hana problem by destroying an equivalent amount of money from your possession. Amar of Ada Bar Ava, which is very, very useful, because if I had 2 prohibited loaves of bread that got mixed in with 20 permissible ones, now I don't have to destroy 22 loaves. All I have to do is destroy the value of 2 loaves, and I'm okay. Amar Rav Ada Bar Ava. Rav Ada Bar Ava says, Lo shanu el pas. This is only the case when it comes to bread, that he allows us to throw it into the sea. Ava chavis lo. But if I've got yayin nesech, I've got wine that's yayin nesech in a barrel, that's not okay. Cannot do that. Why? Because, well, we'll see in a second. But Rav Chisda Amar afilu chavis muteris, and Rav Chisda disagrees. He says even a barrel is permissible. Now, they're not going to disagree. We're going to see in about 20 pages or so that they're not going to disagree in a circumstance where yayin nesech gets mixed in itself with wine itself. If that gets combined together, then the yayin nesech mix is non-discernible from the prohibited, from the yayin nesech is non-discernible from the permissible wine. The whole thing is ruined. That's for sure you got to destroy. But the argument here is whether the barrels, when they're sealed, is the same thing as the bread. Whether you can sell all of these barrels of wine and then simply destroy the value of the yayin nesech ones, that's the issue. That's concern. And then you can sell to a non-Jew, and then or you can throw away the profit and be able to drink from it, actually, right? That's where their argument exists. Because here, it's not that the item that was Avodah Zara was used to create a secondary item. Here, the item itself is the yayin nesach. So potentially, it's stricter. So therefore, Rav Chisda wants to, Rav Ada Bar Ava wants to suggest that if it's yayin nesach that we're dealing with, everyone agrees that you cannot just simply redeem it, quote unquote, and throw the value into the yamah. There was once a fellow whose barrels of yayin nesech got mixed up with his own wine. Also, the Kamei Rav Chisda, he came before Rav Chisda. Amar shekul arbazuze v'shadi ben nahar v'nishtari lach. Go take, he said, Rav Chisda following his own opinion, and who holds that it's mutter, and that's the way we're going to hold the halacha. As we said, we hold like Rabbi Eliezer, and Rav Chisda says that this is the halacha. Take 4 zuz, the value of the barrel of wine that was prohibited, and throw that to Yamamach. You don't have to destroy all of the rest of your wine. Next Mishnah. Keitzot mivat lo. How do you nullify a shera tree? What's the method for nullifying? If remember, a Jew can't. Right? A Jew can't nullify Avodah Zara, but a non-Jew, what would he do? So kirsim ve'zired. So what he should do is he should pull off some branches and burn them up, or either some dry branches or prune some live branches. Not only so, and then that way by defacing the tree, he indicates that he has no value, he doesn't respect it, and that it's not for idolatry. Not only mena makel o sharvit. So if he takes from it a stick, or a sharvit is in Megillus Esther is a scepter, right? But I don't know if it means a scepter here. It's some kind of a branch or something like that. Afilu Allah, or even a leaf. Hareze batla. So then he has nullified it. Shifa letzarcha asura shelo letzarcha muteres. If he has made it some chips, if he chips some wood off for the sake of beautifying the tree, so then the tree is still prohibited because he has not nullified the tree by doing that. But if he does it for his own benefit, he just wants the wood, so then that does nullify it, right? Because then he's not serving the idol by doing that. Says the Gemara. Oh, so which we've discussed this. This Mishnah was quoted previously, and therefore we sort of understand the idea that by breaking off pieces of it for the sake of non-idolatry, he's defacing it, and therefore it nullifies the Avodah Zara. But if he breaks off for the sake of beautifying the tree, that's not nullification of the Avodah Zara. That's just benefiting the tree. So says the Gemara, Osun shipoin matehelehan. Fine, we understand whether the tree is nullified or not. Depends on what the intent of the non-Jew was when he broke the pieces off. What happens to the broken pieces, right? The broken pieces permitted if the tree is. We're talking about if the tree is right. He's nullifying. So what happens to the tree pieces? So Pligi ba Rav Huna barav. So this is v'chia. Sorry, Rav Huna v'chia barav. So there's an argument between Rav Huna and Chia barav. Chad amar asurin. So he says that that's not, these branches that are broken off are not themselves nullified. And Chad amar mutarin, and the other says it's fine, right? If you've nullified the main tree, the branches that you're peeling off are also nullified. So Tanya Kimandamu Mutarin. We have a brisa that supports the idea of the opinion that holds that it's permissible. Tanya, as we learn in a brisa, if somebody is going to, a non-Jew is going to peel off pieces of this tree for his own benefit, he doesn't care for this idolatry anymore, he ushva eha mutarin. So then the tree is nullified, and also the piece that he peeled off, since it's for his own use, not for the idol, they're both permissible. But if he's doing it in order to worship the tree, he asura, then the tree is prohibited still. Ushva eha mutarn, but the pieces that you broke off, since he was doing it for his own benefit, are permissible as well. The Yisrael sheshifa ba avodas kochavim, but a Jew, by the way, parenthetically, if a Jew does it, so then bein litzorcho, he ushva asur. It doesn't matter what purpose he's doing it for. He can't nullify an idol. Hence, the tree is still prohibited and the branches are still prohibited. So the Jew can't nullify at all. Itmar, talking about this issue, avodos kochavim shenishtabra, talking about we had mentioned this discussion in the past, a avodah zara that breaks on its own. So Rav Amar tzarich levatel kol kisa v'kisam. Rav says you're going to have to nullify every piece of this broken idol that breaks by itself. The fact that it breaks was never nullified. It just broke up. Shmuel says, as we've discussed before, avodas kochavim eina betela ela derech gedilasa. He says that idol is not nullified except in the way that it grows, meaning that if does not require nullification. Sorry, I should print that. An idol does not require nullification unless the pieces that fall off is the way that it grows. So if a tree has all of its leaves fall off in the fall, then those leaves remain prohibited because that's the way the normal tree grows. But if an idol falls over by itself, we apply the logic that we discussed before, that if the idol couldn't save itself, then how's it going to help me? So a non-Jew sees a broken idol that fell down and presumes that it's and nullified. We can presume that it's nullified and therefore it's permissible. Okay, well, Adirab. So, well, one second. This the way that it's written here, though, is I did translate it right at the first time, right? That it's only nullified the way that it grows. Adirab. No, the reverse should be said. Derech gedilsa mi mevatla. It's if it falls, the trees fall in the fall, leaves fall in the fall. That's not nullification. El hachkamer. This is what he means to say. Ein avodas kochavim tzricha levatel el derech gedilasa. Like I said it the second time, right? The tree, the leaves that fall, those are not nullified. You still have to nullify them. The piece of if it falls by itself and breaks, if an idol falls over and breaks by itself, then it is automatically nullified. Lema b'hakim ifilgi. So let's say this is the argument between Rav and Shmuel. Again, Rav says idol falls over by itself, broken pieces are not nullified. Shmuel says it falls over and breaks by itself, the broken pieces are nullified. So this is what they argue about. Demar Savar Ovdin Lishiborin. Rav must hold that they still worship the broken pieces, right? You've got an idol falls over, it breaks. Then what could be the problem? The answer is broken pieces of idols are still valuable commodities. They still worship them. Umar Savar Ein Ovdin Lishiborin. And Shmuel says they don't worship the broken pieces. They're nullified. They said that the idol couldn't save itself. It's not going to save me. No, that's not what's going on here. Dekuliyama oved in the shibarn. Everybody agrees that the non-Jews worship the broken pieces. That's not the issue. The hacha, and here they're not even arguing, right? Everybody agrees that when the idol falls over, it's still a problem. You still have to nullify them. Here, v'hacha b'shivrei shivarim kimifagi. We're talking about pieces that are broken off of the broken pieces. Mar savar shivrei shivarim asurim. One says the pieces they break off of the main broken pieces, even that they take home as souvenirs and they worship, right? I've got a piece of the idol, the broken idol that everybody worshipped, and that is enough that people will worship it. Umar Savar, the other one says, Shivrei Shivar Mutarim. The other one says, no, broken pieces of broken pieces, right? Once they're breaking pieces off of their broken pieces, so then that is nullified. That's even that's a step too far, and that is for sure nullified. Because, yeah. Zara, and v'ibois ema, or else if you want, I will say, the kuliyama shivrei shivar mutarim. Everyone agrees that the broken pieces of the broken pieces are permissible. V'hacha bavodos kochavim shel cholios. We're talking about an Avodah Zara that is meant to be broken into pieces. It's a portable Avodah Zara. You take it apart. And it fell down, and it's like Lego, right? You've got a Lego Avodah Zara, and it falls down, and it breaks. And it's meant to be put back together. So this is the argument. Mar Savar Kevin to head Yod Yochelos. Since a regular person can put it back together, lo batla, the non-Jew says, okay, so it fell over, big deal. So we'll put it back together. It's not a big deal. Still an idol. Umar Savar Ein Avodos Kochavim Betela Eladerach Gidilasa. And to which Shmuel says, no, if it falls over, breaks any way that it breaks, that is a sign to the non-Jew not to continue to worship it. Dahainu Urchei. So, but if it falls over, only if it falls over in the way that it grows, like leaves fall off of trees, then that's the normal way. So then they don't nullify it. Halav Gedilasa. But if it breaks in any other way other than natural, so then lav gedilasihi ve'ein tzrich levatel. Then it's not necessary to nullify it separately. The fact that it broke, even if it was meant to be taken apart, is a sign, and it gets nullified. Hadran Allah kol tzlamim, hadran kol tzlamim, hadran kol tzlamim. We move on to the next parak number 4. Rabbi Yishmael says, let's talk about Merculus. Merculus, I believe, is identified with Mercury. And the god of Mercury, as we know in our Roman mythology, is the god of travelers, right? Is the wayfarers. And the common practice was they would put this idol up. It was symbolized, and I have to look it up and see if I can find pictures, but they would have basically a person with a hand outstretched, maybe pointing the way where to go. And so they put this in the roads in order to be able to be able to guide the travelers. There's Marculus, and that the name Marculus may be like we said, you're not allowed to use the actual name of the Avodah Zara, so maybe it's slightly changed. But in any event, it was worshipped by throwing stones to it, right? Now we're going to discuss the issue, and I think it's fair to be able to give the preview. The issue is that the stones that are being thrown have 2 potential issues that we're going to discuss over the next page or so. Number one, the statue itself, right? What they would do is they would not only have the original statue, but they would make little mini versions of the statue. And the mini versions could just be one rock, a second rock, and a third rock placed on top. That's basically like, the 2 arms and the head or whatever the basic image, the basic shape of the idol. So that 2 rocks and 1 rock on top is enough to be marvelous. I'm not quite sure why, but the way that they worshipped it was to throw stones to the idol or at the idol, and it would create a large pile of stones. The pile of stones is a discussion. Is throwing stones to the idol, are the stones a sacrifice to the idol, making them zivche mesim, and zivche mesim, there's no way to nullify that, right? Or is it become part of the idol, right? It becomes a larger rock pile, and all of those rocks in the pile become part of the idol. If it's part of the idol, then in a way it's actually easier because a non-Jew can come along and nullify those rocks. So that's going to be our issue. So Rabbi Yishmael says, Sholosh avonim zu b'tzad zu. If you've got three rocks next to each other, b'tzad markulis, next to a markulis statue, asuros. So then those are prohibited. Ushtayim mutaros. But if you only have two rocks, that's going to be permissible. The Chachamim say, Sheniros imo asuros. It does not matter whether it's two rocks or three rocks. If it looks like the rocks are near the Merkulis statue, then they are prohibited. V'she'eniros imo mutaros. But if they're mutaros, and if it's more rocks, but it's far away from the Merkulis, then they're fine. Okay, so now let's say the Gemara says, Bishlama Rabbanim Kasavri Ovdim L'Shivorim. So I understand the rabbi's point of view. They hold that once they throw the rocks at the Merkulis, so then it builds up the Merkulis statue, and now you've got a bigger Merkulis, and they're worshiping the pile of Merkulis rocks. So therefore, it doesn't matter if you throw one rock, two rocks, or 18 rocks. If they are near the Merkulis, then it's part of the Merkulis, and therefore they're all prohibited. If it's far away from the Merkulis, then either the person has really bad aim, or he's not worshiping the Merkulis. So therefore, those rocks that are far away are fine. So I understand the rabbi's perspective. Neros imo, so he says, Neros imo, so if the rocks are close by, so then we can suggest that there was a Merkulis here, and it fell off the Merkulis pile. So asuros, so then they become prohibited because they're part of the Merkulis monument. Sheineris imo, if their rocks are not visible with it, mutaros, then they're fine. Ella, Rabbi Yishmael, my kasavar. What is Rabbi Yishmael holding? E ovdin l'shivarim. If he holds that we're going to worship the pieces of the Merkulis, afilu tartinami, then two rocks that are there should be worshipped and prohibited as well. So then leitzar, they should be prohibited. E ein ovdin l'shivarim. If they don't worship the broken pieces of the Merkulis, once the Merkulis is taken away, the broken rocks are there. Afilu tzchos lo, then three rocks should also be permitted. It's irrelevant. So Amar Rav Yitzchak Bar Yosef, Rav Yitzchak Bar Yosef explains on Rabbi Yochanan, Beyadua shenishru mimenu divrei hakol asuros. You're right. If it was known clearly that these rocks came from the Merkulis, then you're right, they'd be prohibited. Everyone would agree that. Vafilam under aim ovdin l'shivarim, and even according to the opinion that says we don't worship the broken pieces of these rocks, hanimili avodos kachavim, delav hainu orchei. That would be other types of avodah zara, which is not normal way, right? If I've got a broken piece of idol that fell off, we said that was permissible. That doesn't have anything to do with Merkulis, because Merkulis is different. Avahacha here, when it comes to Merkulis, demikara tevure mitbere hainu orchei. That's the way that they worship the Merkulis. It was broken up pieces of rocks, and they throw rocks to it. That was normal. Merkulis is supposed to be a broken up piece of rubble. That's the way Merkulis looks. So therefore, the fact that it's broken rocks does not, like broken pieces, would not be an issue. So clearly, broken pieces of Merkulis would be prohibited, no question. Kipligi, the argument in our Mishnah is bistama. I've got a rock. I don't know where this rock comes from. Nun Amid Aleph. B'mikuravos. I'm sorry, where did I go? B'mikuravos nami de'ikalememar nimine nafal divrei hakol asuros. Now, if the rocks are really close to the Merkulis, so then everybody can say for sure they fell off the Merkulis. That's for sure. Kipligi b'meruchakos. So their argument is these rocks are a little bit further distant. Okay? So therefore, a little bit further distant, that's where the rabbis say it probably came from the Merkulis. We don't know where these rocks came from. Presume they all came from the Merkulis, and to which Rabbi, what's it again? Rabbi Yishmael says, no, you need three in order to feel that it came from the Merkulis or not. So, okay, 1 second though. You can interpret the Mishnah before we explain why it would make a difference 2 or 3. Habitzad Merkulis katani. You can't explain the Brisa as the rocks are a little bit far away because the Mishnah says you found these rocks next to the Merkulis. So if it's next to the miraculous, that's not far away from the miraculous. So my bitzad, so what do we mean by next to the miraculous? Bitzad arba amos. We mean within the 4 amos around the miraculous, right? 4 amos, about 6 feet. So you got about a 6 foot circle around the miraculous, and you've got rocks in that circle. The question is, do you presume the rocks came from the miraculous or not? But amos today. Rabbi Shmuel says, Osun miraculous katan b'tzar miraculous godol. Here's what happens. They had the main miraculous, and then I guess when it gets crowded, they would, within 4 amos of the main miraculous, make a little second baby mini miraculous next to it. And they take 2 rocks and pile up a third one on top of it, right? So they would have 3 rocks over to the side. That's mini miraculous, says Rabbi Shmuel. And therefore, those are prohibited also. Shalosh dedamyon lemiraculous. So if you've got 3 rocks, which is similar to the way miraculous was built, asuros, then those 3 rocks are prohibited. Shtayim, if you've only got 2 rocks, then mutaros, then those 2 rocks are permissible. To which Rabbanan Savri, the Rabbanan disagree. Enos and miraculous katan b'tzad miraculous gadol. There's no such thing as a mini miraculous next to the main miraculous. Loshna shalosh v'loshna shtayim. So it doesn't matter whether it's 3 rocks or 2 rocks. Nero's imo, if it looks like it could have fallen from the main miraculous, so then asuros, then they're permissible. She'ein neros imo mutaros. And if they're not, then it's prohibited. Okay, so Amar Mar. So Mar says, B'yadua shenishru mimenu divra kol asuros. Okay, so we said that the Chachamim said, if you know that they fell from them, for sure they're prohibited. Or a mini, but we have a contradiction. Avanim shenishru, we have a brisa that says, Avanim shenishru mina miraculous. If I've got rocks that fell off a miraculous, Neros imo asuros, if it looks like they fell from it, if they're near to it. Now, they know this is a case, we explained our Mishnah is that it's unclear whether they fell or not. This brisa seems to imply that even if you knew 100% that they fell, there's still an argument. Neros imo asuros, if they're near it, then they're prohibited. She'ein neros imo mutaros, and if they're not near it, it's permissible. To which Rabbi Shmuel says, sholosh asuros, 3 would be prohibited, shtayim mutaros, and 2 would be permitted. Now, how are you going to explain this? Because according to the way that we understood before, it was a question of what the doubt was. Now we're saying there's no doubt. We know that it fell. Rava says, Lo tema shenishu. You've got to read this brisa. It's not this brisa that you know that they fell. Ela ema shen nimtzu. You have to read this brisa as the stones were found. We don't know what the original source of the stones is. These stones were simply found. So we're back to our original explanation. You just found stones. Rabbi Shmuel holds they make a mini miraculous next to it. That's why we can presume these stones are prohibited. The Chachamim say if they don't look like it came from the main miraculous, there's no such thing as a mini miraculous, and the stones are permitted. The Savar Rabbi Shmuel Shtaim Mutaros. Now, are you telling me that Rabbi Shmuel holds that if I find 2 stones on the side, they're permitted? Vatanya, we learn Rabbi Brisa. Rabbi Shmuel says Shtaim Shetfisa Bo Asuros Sholosh Afilu Merchakos Asuros. Rabbi Shmuel says if there's 2 rocks within the grasp, meaning sounds like within the 4 amos, then those would be prohibited. 3 rocks Afilu Merchakos, even if they're far away, those would be prohibited. So he requires there to be 3 rocks, right? Amar Rava says, Lo kasha, it's not a contradiction. Kan betfisa achas, kan b'shtei tfisos. This grasp, and then there's grasp. Grasp is in the immediate, quick vicinity. Then we have within 4 amos where there's some sort of a object in between blocking them so that it's clear that these rocks did not come and they'd be set up separately. So, well, what we're going to explain, we'll stop here because we have to go to Minyan, and we'll pick this up. We'll pick up this topic when we return tomorrow evening.
Fantastic. Sounds good. I have a question, but you know what? Because of time, I will hold it until tomorrow.
Or pop it into the chat. You can answer
Perfect. Thank you so much, Rabbi Loiterman.